interesting because the people, I think it's okay to record, yeah.
And we can decide.
Okay, sure. This project has been really interesting for me personally because somewhat organically, it's brought in PhD students and sometimes undergrads, but right now everyone happens to be a grad student coming from, or I guess, Tommy, you're a staff person, you're a post-degree person. But everyone is really trained in their own discipline. And they brought many skills that were new to me to the project team. And I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves on screen, but I think we should also introduce ourselves in the room. But it's been really exciting for me to learn and sort of watch and learn, for example, how designers with an art school background ideate and sort of iterate and arrive at a final concept. It's been really, and sort of what tools they use and what their methods are and what their processes are. Same thing for computer science, visualization researchers and computer science, sort of like, what does the prototyping process look like? How do you get a sense of your data set? How do you go from data to final visualization? And from a humanities background, it's been really interesting to see how someone who is not me came to this project and sort of put their own critical lens on the project and brought some new ways of thinking about the various components. And so to me, it's a really exciting and dynamic part of I think that's why the project is, I think it's great. I think it's part of why the project is so great, but like a little different than a lot of digital humanities projects. And I think it's really interesting just as someone who is interested in how other fields do their thing. And so that's sort of what was my goal for this hour, was just to get you to meet some of the other people involved in this project and ask them some questions about whatever you want, really. And hopefully try to convey some of the originality and the innovation that sort of exceeds my personal ability to describe it in depth. So that's sort of what I've got. Maybe I feel like we should all introduce ourselves, including you, because I'm not sure that everyone on the screen knows.
And also,
yeah, but let's maybe, do you want to go around this way?
I'll start. Okay, so I'm Giovanna Cesarani. I'm in the classics department and in the history department, and currently also the faculty director of CESTA, which is a space where we are actually now here, and I just wish you could all be with us in person, but I hope that will happen, which is a Center for Spatial and Textual Analysis, and where the Digital Humanities have on campus. And I'll just tell you a little bit about my point of interest in this in particular. I am one of these humanists who started doing digital humanities. I started with the Mapping Republic of Letters project in 2009-8, and we were completely, like the faculty, the humanities faculty involved was completely new to the idea of digital humanities. Now that I finally published one big part of the work after many, many years, I had to go back and do the history of the project in emails and so on. And I realized that how clueless in certain ways that we were. Like, we didn't even have the words for many things, but we did find visualizations incredibly powerful. And then we ended up collaborating also the creation of a visualizing tool thought really for the humanities, which is Palladio. And that's where I started collaborating with designers, with developers, and it was a brand new world, and it has been like that since. And I just want to say two more things, not too much more, but that this has been such an exciting, I don't even want to count the years in a way, but I remember also one of the first collaborators, faculty collaborators, went to Harvard to present our work, and the reaction was so negative. And I think that that's not the case anymore, but there is much more acceptance and enthusiasm by many humanists about the value of working with data, with visualizations. Everybody's used to working with text online by now, and even without being aware, many tools. But there are still so many barriers to cross. And one, like the publication moment has been interesting to come, because that's where people, like the existing platforms, like again, some of them even have limits, even if the online ones, on numbers of authors that you can put, so it's just like, it's interesting to come to the end of many projects, and even at the moment to think anew, what does it mean to represent collaborations to the outside world? And so I think it's very important to have conversations like the one that I'm looking forward to today, because we have to find ways to really convey the importance and significance of this new way of doing work together, and how much we all learn from it. So that's me. Eric, you are.
I'm Eric Ortiz. I'm the events manager for the Stanford Humanities Center, and I've been helping Lauren with her visit here to Stanford the past
I'm Lauren, you know.
couple days.
Hi, I'm Ariel. I'm a third year PhD in the sociology department. I'm also a fellow at SESTA, and I'm working on a project on textual analysis using curricula data to analyze changing patterns of nationalism. So I think I'm just hoping to understand more how to effectively use the data I have and convince people of the story I'm telling.
Hey, I'm Sarami. I'm a freshman, and I'm part of SESTA's undergraduate research assistantship, and I'm currently working on the Expanding ELA project, where we're collecting course descriptions of colleges and high schools and seeing how we can make English education better in the United States. And yeah, I think this program was a really helpful introduction to digital humanities, and I want to major in data science or a related field. So yeah, I feel like it has opened my eyes to like hopefully doing research in like humanities or like environmental issues.
So my name is Michael Pon, and I'm a Stanford alumni back in 82, 83 in EE. And but I was also very active in like the Rainbow Coalition and things like that. And I've always had that kind of interest. And what struck me last night at your talk was that it sounded like there's this well, it's related to today. There are implications to what's going on in the public space today, political space today, but it also has a lot to do with intersectionalism and all sorts of things like that, which are of interest to me, and especially because I'm trying to work on some Chinese American aspects of this that have some data related things to them.
Cool. Tanvi, do you want to go first online and then just bounce it to someone else on Zoom?
Yes, totally. I'm Tanvi. I am the lead designer on this project. I'm a design researcher at Emory. I did my undergrad in graphic design and humanistic studies at Maryland Institute College of Art, and then I went to grad school or for a master's program at NYU in integrated digital media. So I've been on this project for a while, and it's really nice to like meet everyone and potentially discuss like how we could help with any like design directions that you're thinking of, and like share more of our process. Xiao, do you want to go?
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone. My name is Xiao. I'm a first year computer science PhD student at Emory. So before that, I was a data science master student. So my research is focusing on the human side of visualization. It's like investigating how humans incorporate their prior belief to interpret data visualization. So I think my experience working with Lauren really augment my visualization research from the other side, like how to design visualization that's serving for humanistic purpose. So yeah, it was such a magical experience to working on humanistic data set and visualization as well.
hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes.
It's funny that Shio said magical because we call him our team wizard. I'm Courtney. Thank you for having us and joining us today. I am a fifth-year PhD candidate in English at Emory, and I study Black performance theory.
Margie, I feel like your headphones, your
Oh, are they
AirPods
bad?
are dying. Yeah, because you keep on cutting in and out.
They're bad. Of course they are. That always happens. Okay. Are we normal? Are we back? We're regular, schmegular? Okay. So yes, I'm in the English program at Emory. I'm in my fifth year. I study Black Sound Studies, performance theory, and I also focus a lot on humor and satire and horror, kind of like genre-ish things. But mainly what I'm realizing more and more is how I study kind of extra textual language and how that is translated into written language. So I think a lot about what it means to laugh and how laughter is a type of language, and other kind of emotive, affective, sonic descriptions of how we express and exchange meaning with each other. So yeah, I would be happy to talk about any and all of that or none of that. But that's me.
Eric, I can't see.
Dana?
Dana's only
Dana,
one person.
okay. Okay. Dana, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself and say hi, but if not, if you can, you are welcome to, but if not, we can move on. I know sometimes I've also been in transit while listening, so that is fine. Glad to have you here. So there's sort of two ways we could go forward. One is we could just open the floor for questions, if you have questions you want to ask. The other is that I could ask everyone to talk a little bit about the specific contributions they made or are making to the project, if that would be more helpful for context. Maybe, okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, and I say this, like I said before, because these were mostly processes that were new to me as someone who has my own design process, but it's one that comes from combination of software development and industry, but also just humanistic writing and thinking. And I thought that it was really interesting as each of these amazing team members came to the project, how they brought their own process to the project. And so I thought maybe you could go, and maybe we can sort of like go in the same order, Tanvi, Xiao, then Margie, and talk about a little bit about what your process was, and also like some of the tools that you used, and sort of how you thought about, and how you brought the expertise from your own field and training to this particular process.
Sure. I can go first. So I'm a designer. I guess some of the things that I think about are like if we have a concept or a specific point that we're trying to make with a data visualization, like what our constraints are. So what are we trying to do? What are we not trying to do? I like to start with looking at references of what already exists in the world. And that's like references in graphic design, painting, sculpture, in all forms of media, really. And then thinking about, okay, sidetrack. I have that thing where you can't imagine things. So if you tell me to imagine an apple and I close my eyes, I just see like blurry blackness. So that I feel like guides a lot of like what my process looks like, which is like I need to gather like what references or like a mood board or what have you to start thinking about like, okay, these are the things that I think are doing what I want to do in some way, shape, or form. And usually I'll start like bringing all this stuff to Figma, which is a design tool. I don't know if people are familiar with it or have used it. I see some nodding. Okay, great. It's good for working collaboratively, I think they have a good student plan, so it's free-ish, and what do you call it? You can also, especially if you're making work for the web or I guess even print, you can kind of think about, for web in particular, like what interactions do you want? So like thinking about if thinking about things like step by step, like first you will click this and then you will go here and then this will happen and this will happen and then this is the final stage. So like really storyboarding what you want that journey to look like. And then when it comes to and after that stage, I guess I start thinking about, okay, what tools are we using for visualizing this? So if we're using libraries like P5 or like D3, 3JS, if there's existing interactions that I think are novel and maybe have, like with this project, I think in particular, one of my goals has been to like push what database looks like and what I can do. Like I don't want to just make a normal bar graph or a pie chart that like no one's gonna give a second thought to, but really challenge what the visual form of conveying that data is. So then doing some research into the technicalities and how that can be processed or achieved, and if we can like beg, borrow, steal from other sources. And that's where Xiao comes in to like start prototyping this at a higher fidelity, like taking it from like static screens or like small prototypes to like actually pulling in the data and seeing, okay, what does this look like? That sometimes I'll have a design that's looks pretty, and I'm like designing for, the ideal consequences, like, oh, this five statements will look all pretty like in these four corners. And then she was like, there's 50 statements and it looks like, a lot. So like thinking about those edge cases, what happens when you're like you're even if you put your data in a system, it's not necessarily always all gonna be cohesive or similar. Like there's always gonna be like quirks, for example, like not like if you're sketching something out, usually you want to test like a long sentence or like a sentence with like words that are, just make sure that like how are things getting hyphenated, like what is like typography, I think is a big part of working with language, making sure that that's clear. And yeah, I guess that's usually where then I start working with Xiao or like doing developmental work myself. In the early stages, I'm usually working with Lauren or the rest of the team and trying to like ideate, okay, does this like idea, the visual metaphor work for what we're trying to achieve, or like is there something else to do? So I'm gonna I can also like share my screen and talk more about this, but I'm gonna hand it off to Xiao so he can give you a little bit of a rundown of his process, and then maybe we can do questions.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Tanvi, for the amazing intro. So when I was just joining Lauren's team as a PhD student doing the rotation project on visualization, so to be honest, I was not very clear about what kind of tools or techniques I was going to use. So since I was a master's student in Vanderbilt, so in my research team at Vanderbilt, the main duty of mine is that I handle all of the dirty data sets and I make all of the visualizations, like the statistical chart in the paper for submission. So when I just obtain a data set, even though it is a very sensitive data set about the slaving voyages, so the first draft I throw out for a team is still a statistical chart. So I think then it is the essential part of the collaboration. Like you try to present your visualization and other team members. So we have Tanvi, the designer, and we also have Lauren, and we also have Marky to tell me like what do they feel about the visualization. So then I just decide like what kind of argument do we want to make from the visualization, and then I decide what types of tool shall I use? So for instance, we look at a metaphor of a beanbag. So WinMap is like a animation. So pfab.js is a very good tool for prototyping animated visualization. So I switched to pfab.js to prototype another iteration of the visualization, which is like a river wind map. And we try to do the meeting again and share our feelings about the visualization. And we also feel that, okay, so for such a sensitive data set, we don't want our visualization to be that beautiful. And we actually want to really emphasize the concept of resistance during the slave voyage journey and also honor the lives behind the data. So I think for me, it's all about identifying the proper metaphor of the visual representation. So then we switched to something like the Fisk river diagram. So then I try to combine some of the D3.js and P5.js to make another visualization. So I really want to emphasize the point that it is the motivation of finding the proper way to make the argument like drives my selection of the techniques I was about to use. Yeah, so that is sort of my process of making this visualization.
As you were speaking, Xiao, I realized I have Committed to Memory by Cheryl Finley in my campus office. And I was thinking about how, so the main, the chapter that Xiao's referencing is the first one on every data point a person and how we're thinking about, and I'm gonna show a depiction of a blurry depiction of the what is it, Plan of the African Slave Ship. So just be, if you don't want to see it, content warning. But like you have this plan here, which we are reconsidering as a data set itself. And then also like you'll have like a plan like the Murray Seraphique from 1769. But then what Cheryl Finley does is also talk about how those are art pieces. And so how people have reimagined them. And so for me, from a literary scholar standpoint, I think it was always important for me to continue to consider what the visual means, what it represents, not just in terms of quantity, but also in terms of affective response. And so that also kind of plays into how the creators of the visualization and data sets are intending it to be reached, who their audience is, and then how that audience changes over time, and the people that they are depicting are converted and abstracted nonetheless, and how that has an impact on us today. And so for me, my particular purpose in this project, aside from being like, I have said before, like being the humanities support student on this project. So aside from that, I was initially brought on to write alt text. So image descriptions. And in a project about visualization, it kind of was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense that we should think about image descriptions. But I also come from sound studies in particular, which doesn't seem, I guess, like it would work out so well, but it does. I'm just astounded, like more and more how the two fields, I guess, are not disparate, because what sound studies, at least in my training, brings forth is how we should be questioning or complicating the overdetermination of sight in our culture. And So when I write alt text, I'm thinking about all of those things at once. And it's really hard to do, honestly. Like it definitely like, there's some images that are a little bit more straightforward than others. But some of these are super intricate, detailed, complicated, culturally rich images. All of them are culturally rich. But they have a lot of weight to them, especially like with the plan of the African slave ship. So a part of our process in trying to figure out how to represent the images linguistically was trying to figure out how, like, what language to use that doesn't reinscribe a kind of harm that would restate the violence of the Middle Passage. And that's something that we kind of try to mirror with the option to toggle the site on the web page, which won't be an option for the print version, unfortunately, or maybe it will. I don't know. I don't know what magic Lauren has. But there's something about like choosing what and how to see, and then with the language for the alt text, for the image descriptions for users who most likely cannot see, or who just their servers don't have the bandwidth. How can we write descriptions of the images that aren't super prescriptive, but still invite the reader in to interpret along with what we've written and designed, if that makes sense. So yeah, alt text is the primary like location, I guess, where I can be found in this project. And then also Tomby and I were working on labor chapter, the labor chapter, and trying to visualize labor, which is another thing that might be cool to talk about. But yeah, I guess that's kind of what I got. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I missed.
I think that's super great. So do you have any specific questions that you want to ask? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I guess like I have two questions. Just the first one is like, this might be more relatable to you since you're also from humanities, but I think like people don't really use like creative designs in humanity. There's a very like standardized way of doing like data and using like R plots, like and also there's kind of like a rigor to like, oh, standardizing your charts. So I'm just wondering how you like imagine yourself kind of pushing against this narrative, or like how do you like converse with people who, I think there's like some sort of like gap between your conversation, right? Like you're thinking creative, they're thinking standard rigor sort of things. And then I think the second question I have for also, like I think you mentioned that y'all are trying to not make the language too prescriptive when describing data. Like how do you go about doing that?
One thing, so I have a thought, and then I'm gonna pass it back to the remote crew. So one of the really interesting things is that, so I think you're totally right that we are thinking very creatively in this particular project, but I also do a lot of work that's very applied, where we're producing R plot images or the equivalents, you know, for technical papers, and there's sort of a general consensus as to what they should look like. But one of the really kind of amazing things that has happened since Tomby became a full-time researcher on this project is that I can now hand over like the screenshot version or like the PNG version of whatever it is that we produced just through like a standard visualization library and be like, Tomby, how can we make this better? Or like, we really want to emphasize this thing. And so Tomby will almost like sort of like take that as a prototype and enhance it. And the result has been that our visualization game and all of my lab's technical publications it's just like so amped up right now. It's very amazing. But I think, you know, like, but I say that to say that, like, to me, one of the big gaps, and I think the reason why right now we have kind of this two different practices instead of more constant overlapping, is that the skill sets that are required for more technical publications are not the ones that are required for a project like this. And it's not very often that we have environments where not only the people go between those two projects, but the other thing that I really feel like is worth making explicit is like, everyone has developed, and I don't even know the degree to which you all are aware of this, but we can communicate across our disciplines in a shared language that I think should not be taken lightly, because like I've done a lot of collaborations over a lot of years, and sometimes you meet people who just can't find the words to communicate what they want outside of their disciplinary jargon. And it's been amazing, you know, to see everyone, but like Tanvi in particular, be pulled into what's essentially like a computational social science paper where we're talking about, Louvain clustering and community matching and like fairly technical stuff. And, Tanvi will be able to hear what people, that team is saying about what they want to communicate and then translate it visually. And in general, I feel like A of all, that's a huge skill that people don't know that they need. But B of all, the output it's so exciting to see the output of that process, because the visualizations are, they're not that much different. Like that's the thing. It's not even like they look super different, but they're sharper in how they communicate the findings than I personally would be able to get if I was just like, hey, ggplot, make me a bar chart, right? So I don't. So that's sort of like my own thought about like scientific versus creative visualization. What was the second part of your question?
Oh yeah, and I think you mentioned making the words not prescriptive.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, Margie, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
You're like, and that goes to you.
No, talk about Tina Kemp and listening to images. Because I actually feel like that to me is like a very amazing insight that Margie brought to this project.
Yeah, so Tina Kemp is a literary scholar, Black scholar, historian, like visual culture, everything. And she wrote this book in 2017 called Listening to Images, which is basically about unsettling the ground that, as I was saying, sight holds on us. And instead, we can like attune to a kind of visual register of what we see, which is really, it's very confusing. When Xiao and I were first like kind of trying to put this practice that I realized I was doing as I was writing alt text into written language, he was writing or reading some of the intro and going like, wait a minute, let me back up again and read it. It was very complicated, and I commend Xiao for wading through the Tina Kemp waters. But it's really honestly at bottom of methodology or a practice of decentering sight and thinking about frequency. So like how sound and sight and all of our senses, like how they are tactile. And so she kind of gets into the sciencey bits that often go over my head, and that is hard to explain. But at bottom, listening to images is a metaphor and a real thing that she is arguing happens. And so I read this book a few years ago, just probably part of my exams or before my comprehensive exams. And I came onto the project as I was finishing my exams. So I wonder if that has any kind of overlap, probably. And especially when I was writing alt text for Du Bois for his data portraits, and that's what kind of why I brought up Cheryl Finley, because when she was talking about like the beauty of it all and how it's hard to represent really traumatic events and data in a beautiful way. So we had to kind of like tease the artistry of some of what we were trying to produce. And for me, Du Bois kind of like 100 years ago, literally seemed to be also grappling with these ideas, because these charts are so vibrant and they're so creative, and they're not standard at all. Like they're just, like he and his Atlanta University students really seem to be experimenting and pushing form. And so I think what listening to images also as a methodology does, not just for me composing, but for readers, makes us reckon with the notion that language is not like concretized, nothing is set in stone about what is being described in terms of the impact that it can have. So Tina Camp, she has this phrase called haptic sensory impact, which is really just a fancy way of saying like where you meet the text like determines kind of how you read it, and you can meet it over and over again, or an image over and over again, and the meaning that you get from that image will change. And for me, that is also true of language, and how I wrote the language for the images. And also, Lauren, I meant to tell you this, my students just turned in their alt text assignment. So that's a way that I have been impacted by this project. Like I've taken it into my classrooms and have taught my students about like multimodality and other ways of composing and other ways of writing that really gets them attuned to audience and venue and language and like the performance of language. And they did a great job. It was so cool. But yeah, I think I was gonna say something else. I can't quite remember because I was rambling as always. But yeah, so the prescription stuff, it's difficult to, it's like the line is so thin. Or at least it can be very thin when you are trying to say this is an image of versus this image includes or something like that. So rather than set in stone what is like what the image means, it's more trying to allude to what it includes, what parts make up the composition. But it's also trying to, this was also a very important thing that we realized as we were going along, that alt text is never not context dependent. It is always enmeshed in the website or the venue, whatever venue it's found on. So I also wanted the alt text to speak to Lauren's text to make sure that everything was in conversation and just building on one another. So some of the contextual information I don't include in the alt text because the reader supposedly has already read some of that in the description, but also sometimes I will repeat information, especially for the Du Bois chapter, to reiterate the importance of like the colors or something like that, even though for a low-sighted viewer, a blind viewer, the colors might not mean much in terms of like, oh, we aren't able to see it. But if you know that there is red, black, and green in an image, you also understand that that signals like Pan-Africanism. Or, you know, so it's just, it's like there are little subtleties like that that matter just based on, you know, we have to really attune and listen to the image rather than just look at and passively.
A question, you mentioned red, black, and green, for example, and then I'm thinking, well, so I was living in East Palo Alto when I was at this school, and I saw a lot of that because there was a lot of Pan-Africanist motivations there. But I think a lot of people don't know what that means when they see it. So I'm kind of wondering if you're sometimes avoiding a description that's needed actually for today or something like that.
I should clarify that I mean to like enhance what is written in the text. So it's not that like we're just kind of dropping information in that's not like sourced, I guess, or whatever, or made explicit. But I think also this is just also a part of language and reading, that when something is repeated or something is known, and if you go, oh, red, green, and black are coming up again, I wonder what that could symbolize, or like why those three like colors are coming in again. It also could invite then the reader to continue looking that up, you know, and continue to be curious about it. So I think that is one of the things too that is giving, allowing like deeper active engagement, which is not to say that I like don't write, which are the colors of like the Pan-African flag. I think there are a couple alt text descriptions where I do say that. I'm trying to remember if there are any specific ones I could point to. But yeah, so it's not as if it's left completely alone, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, because I don't think something like that would be too prescriptive. Especially because it's like also recognition of me as Margie. I have written the alt text and I have a bias and a point of view. Like language is not objective. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. I hope it doesn't become too rambling because it might have 4 questions in it. But Margie, I loved what you said. I'm going to look this up and follow up on it. But it seems that this question of the relationships between the words and the visual is so core, and it's also how you, and there were 2 different endings to the talk yesterday that talk to that. But, and I have there is one version of the question that I have is very, almost like it's practical, and also because I have so many, I know so many faculty assessors who really engaged with this visualizing. And then they say, I love these visualizations, but it speaks only to me. I need to explain it so much more. And I would love for this to seem not like a failure, but that there is something, doesn't mean that the visualization doesn't work because you need to explain it so much. And I think that, Lauren, at the end, yesterday you were saying you really think of the importance of the text as well. So, but I wonder how you've been thinking through this, which is another tension in this process. Because I've seen this, that so many people who have engaged with digital humanities and so on, and then they say, oh, but this, it cannot be the visual alone, and so it's not as powerful. Or does it mean that I just need to go back and just write? If I have to write anyway, what's the point? But this is a question for all of you, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and Margie, a lot of what you said is so interesting. But then on the other end, related to this, because the other ending to the talk, no, it wasn't an answer, Lauren, you said to someone, actually, you know, you can use the visual when words fail you, or where you cannot go further with words. And so this boundary operates in a different way there. And there, I'm very sympathetic to that as well. But you will need the word. Like, it's interesting to think how that then works. But and there, I was thinking about a visualization that I found in my complete different, like in a complete different realm. Like, you know, this is someone who did a Dutch scholar of the 17th century, very interesting moment of revolt, rebellion, democracy in the Dutch lands. And then he writes, he produces a timeline, because and this timeline took me a while, and so timeline is an early way of visualizing something, like it's important this time. And then there are so many empty pages, and I then, like he made space for the empty space, which could be pages and pages, because like it was only 7,000 years ago, like it's biblical times, but still there would be a lot of empty pages. And so that goes back like about like how do we still deal with emptiness? And it was a very powerful statement, because actually books at that point, paper is the most expensive part of the book was paper. So to have empty pages is a big statement. Of course, it was a statement with a lot at stake in many ways, so it was worthwhile. But I wonder, yes, how do we, like, what is the relation, like, there are too many questions in there, but and to bring it together. But apart from what you would say to this thing, it's okay if the visualization still needs so much text, or maybe needs even more text than you did before. But the other is, like, it was interesting in the presentation yesterday of the dynamic versus static visualizations, and this is also for you designers, because that's one thing that we have that, again, the scholar from the 17th century didn't have, the dynamic and the attraction of that, and how much of the visualizations you have created will be dynamic or not, or how do we challenge ourselves, because that's a new boundary that then we also know has got a problem of how long it will last. Like this book from the 17th century, an excellent paper, looks better in the rare books library than certain 19th or 20th century books do now. But yeah, I don't know who wants to take a piece of that.
Maybe if I could say one thing, and then maybe I'll pass to Tanvi and Xiao just to give you maybe the last word, because we're running a little bit short on time. So one of the really interesting things is that I began this project thinking that we would go through a whole process, we would produce the visualizations, and they would be immediately intuited along the precise lines that we had designed them. And that turned out to be totally not true. And all of the feedback that we got was that our visualizations needed textual apparatus in order to make sure that all of the design decisions that we had made, the significance of every little detail was communicated. Otherwise, we would run the risk that the viewers wouldn't perceive that, and then they would have a sort of a less rich viewing experience. And so that was a big change in the revision of the manuscript that we did. And it's also, in a way, a little bit surprising to me, because I, up until writing this project, did sort of buy into the idea that like a picture's worth 1,000 words, that you could communicate everything you wanted it was like an either or, like you could make a single visualization, which would communicate things, or you could write things. And going through this project has really made me realize, not just for this project, but more broadly, that there's so much that is implicit in data visualization. And some things, because they are the convention or best practice or whatever, we don't recognize as overladen with design choices, but should. And then others, because they are so weird, like the things that we make, need textual explanation. And so in the end, where I come down is like, I think all visualizations should have lots of text around them, which was surprising for me to, it was a surprising perspective to end up at, given where I started in the process. And I could say a second thing about the process itself, and I'll just say this very, very quickly, because I want to hear, I'm sort of curious, like Tanvi and Xiao, since you work in visual media, like what you think about this, sort of a relationship between your work and other explanations of text otherwise. But I'll say a similar thing happened with process, where I was like, oh, process is so boring. No one wants to read about it. And there's one chapter where we went through very detailed, actually the sort of like the talk yesterday, where we did say, we tried this, then we did that, then we did that. And people really liked it. And so as we're revising, we're going back in and talking more about the process of archival research and transcription and whatever. Not everywhere, but I think, again, sort of related to this, it's like, because those choices and that process, each step has a little bit of meaning, and it shapes the ultimate thing that you look at. And we don't think enough about how those intermediate inflection points ultimately influence what you can learn in the end. Anyway, Tanvi and Xiao, we're almost short on time. You have like 2 minutes each. Sorry.
Xiao, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I really want to talk about the role of text in visualization. This is sort of relevant to my research. So one of my favorite visualization researcher, Chase Stokes, has a very interesting study on the people's preferences between the textual communication and also visualization, and they identify there is a certain group of people who just prefer to communicate using text or visualization. People also prefer like combining text and visualization and let them to complete each other. And also there has been a long debate that like if people are thinking visually or textually. So I think especially for the process of visualization storytelling, so it is important for me to acknowledge the importance from both the accompanying textual explanation of the visualization and the visual design as well. So I think it's just they should work together for a compelling story.
Tanvi, do you want the last word?
Yeah, I don't want to say much, but there is a book I want to recommend that's called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, where he talks about, so comics are like the quintessential medium of image and text. And he talks about like when image, when text, when both, and what does together. So I would just say go read that. I don't have anything else to add. I can put it in the chat.
Can I say one thing? I know I rambled for like 1,000 hours. But I think this all is just, it's encompassed by the, you can never empty out interpretation of language, whether it is visual or written. And so seeing how they play together and mesh together can like enliven them more and add to each other in really dynamic ways, which I think is really interesting.
That's a perfect closing note. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Also just wanted to say that if anybody wants to reach out and talk more about design and humanities things, I am very down for that. So feel free to hit me up.
Same.
Yes, same for me.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll give the emails.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so happy we recorded this, but we'll talk to you about if anyone here wants to hear more from you. Maybe I'll ask you, Lauren.
Yeah. Well, I have some thoughts about this, so we can talk when it's already showing.
Okay.
Well, it's
bye.
good to meet everyone.
Very nice meeting you and hearing from you. Amazing. Amazing.